Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
So glad to be here.
Imagine stepping into this sprawling medieval city square.
Right.
The scent of, smoked mountain cheese just hits you immediately.
Oh, yeah.
A 600-year-old trumpet melody rings out from this towering Gothic spire.
And then, you're nearly trampled by 20 guys in matching T-shirts drinking incredibly cheap beer.
Exactly. Welcome to Krakow, Poland in 2026.
The contrast is just wild.
It really is. So today we are doing a deep dive into the destination that has essentially hijacked the entire European travel conversation.
It really has taken over.
We have this massive stack of data to go through today, from municipal legislative drafts to dynamic hotel pricing algorithms.
Which are fascinating, by the way.
Oh, completely. And it's all focused on breaking down this medieval Polish city that just landed as the absolute hottest, most inescapable European destination of the year.
You literally can't avoid hearing about it right now.
Right. So our mission today is to give you a complete, unvarnished breakdown of what it actually takes to exist there right now. We're covering the real, on-the-ground nightly costs.
Right down to the exact zloty.
Yep, from the 86 zloty hostel bunks to the 1,119 zloty luxury suites.
Massive range there.
We are also analyzing the controversial tourist tax legislation that could, fundamentally alter the city's economy. And we are exposing a highly specific hidden trap in the spring calendar.
This is the big one.
Yeah, it will literally triple your hotel bill if you are not paying attention.
The stakes here for you, the listener, they really cannot be overstated. Because whether you're a backpacker stretching every single dollar,
right,
or, a family trying to manage complex logistics without a total meltdown, or even a digital nomad looking for a long-term base with solid fiber internet.
Your value changes, right?
It changes dramatically. And so it totally depends on exactly who you are and, crucially, exactly when you choose to cross the border.
Timing is everything.
It really is. So the promise we are making to you today is to provide an honest, rigorous verdict based on the raw numbers and the human geography, too.
We want you to be able to plan this trip without falling into some incredibly expensive, entirely avoidable systemic traps.
But you're everywhere, honestly.
They really are. So stick with us through all 5 of our final traveler verdicts at the end. We're doing backpacker, mid-range couple, family, luxury, and digital nomad.
You'll see that the answer to is it worth it is anything but a simple yes or no.
Definitely not simple, because the numbers surrounding this 2026 surge are, frankly, staggering to look at.
They're huge.
Krakow was just ranked by KAYAK as the #1 top trending European city for the year.
#1.
But it's the specific metric of flight interest that I really want to drill into. We are looking at an astonishing 106% jump versus 2025.
That's more than double.
Right. What is the mechanism behind a spike that sharp? Cities don't just double in popularity overnight without a massive catalyst.
They don't. And when you look at the entire index of Eastern European capitals, Krakow has the steepest jump by a very wide margin.
Wow.
Yeah, it is completely outpacing regional neighbors like Prague or Budapest in terms of sheer search volume and, intent to travel.
So what's driving it?
The mechanism here is a massive continent-wide shift in global travel trends. It's driven by, honestly, economic exhaustion.
People are just priced out.
Exactly. Travelers are being aggressively priced out of Western European mainstays. When a standard double room in Paris, Rome, or London begins averaging $400 to $500 a night.
Which is insane.
It is. A psychological breaking point is reached. Travelers still want the cobblestone streets, the dense history, the Gothic architecture, the vibrant cafe culture.
Right. They still want the classic European trip.
But they are actively hunting for it at a fraction of the cost. And Krakow delivers that exact aesthetic, perfectly preserved.
But I imagine that creates an immediate, severe structural tension.
Oh, absolutely.
Because in 2023, over 7 million tourists visited Krakow.
7 million.
And roughly 900,000 of those were coming from abroad. They are swarming a resident population of just 760,000 people.
That ratio is wild.
You're essentially pouring 10 times the population into the same physical footprint.
It's totally unsustainable.
The local residents must be feeling that friction every single time they try to get on a tram or buy a coffee.
Oh, the locals are furious. And understandably so. They continually flag this ratio as completely unsustainable for daily life.
I mean, how could it not be?
Exactly. The medieval infrastructure of the Old Town was just never designed to handle the sheer tonnage of 7 million transient people.
The physical wear and tear alone must be massive.
The wear and tear, the waste management, the strain on public transit, it all requires massive municipal funding.
Right.
So the response to this pressure from the city council has been to unanimously back a resolution. They're demanding national legislation to implement a tourist fee.
Okay, let's talk about this fee.
Yeah. If this gets passed in 2026, it's projected to add a 5 zloty charge per overnight stay.
5 zloty.
The internal math suggests this could generate anywhere from 30 to 50 million zloty annually for the municipality.
See, I have to push back on the underlying logic of that legislation.
Oh, really?
We are talking about a 5 zloty tax. At current exchange rates, that is barely over a single US dollar.
Right.
If the goal is to ease the burden of over-tourism, is a 5 zloty tax really going to deter a single tourist from coming?
Right.
Because if I have already committed to a transatlantic flight or even just a budget flight from London, an extra dollar a night is not changing my mind.
Not at all.
This feels less like a solution to overcrowding and more like a political bandage designed to pacify angry locals.
You have hit on the exact debate currently raging within the city's political sphere.
I mean, the math doesn't add up as a deterrent.
From an economic standpoint, you are entirely correct. A 5 zloty fee is highly inelastic. It possesses absolutely zero deterrent value. If you can afford the flight and the hotel, you can afford the extra dollar. Therefore, it's purely a revenue capture mechanism, not a volume control mechanism.
So it is just a bandage.
It is a political bandage in the sense that it doesn't solve the crowding issue. The 7 million people will still show up and occupy the physical space.
Right.
But from the municipal perspective, it's a necessary survival mechanism. Right now, the city is bleeding capital, trying to support the infrastructure for those 7 million people.
And they have no direct way to tax them for the wear and tear.
Exactly. Historically in Poland, municipal bodies need national parliamentary approval to levy these kinds of localized taxes.
Oh, I see.
So they're fighting a bureaucratic battle just to capture enough capital to keep the streets clean. It won't stop the surge, but that projected 30 to 50 million zloty might just help the city survive it.
Which brings up a critical point for anyone listening. If the crowds are not going to stop, and that 7 million figure is only going to grow, given this 106% spike in flight interest, then the absolute most important decision you will make is when to time your visit.
Timing is everything.
You have to find a way to avoid the brunt of that mob. And from the data we're looking at, the calendar is an absolute scheduling minefield.
The calendar is undeniably your biggest variable when it comes to both your daily budget and your mental sanity in this city.
So let's break down the seasons.
If we look at the peak season, which encompasses July and August, the temperature is undeniably lovely. It sits at a very pleasant, stable 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
Sounds perfect on paper.
On paper, yeah.
Yeah.
But the reality on the ground is that the main market square, the Rynek Główny, becomes an impassable, solid wall of humanity.
Wow.
You are forced to navigate through dense packs of international stag parties, massive cruise coach tours that have driven in from the Baltic ports, and endless waves of European graduation trips.
It sounds totally suffocating.
It is a suffocating environment. Conversely, if you look at the deep low season, January and February, the landscape shifts entirely.
It gets cheap, right?
Very cheap. Both airfare and 3-star hotel rates plummet by nearly 40%. It becomes incredibly affordable. But you are dealing with the harsh reality of winter in Eastern Europe.
Which means
sub-zero temperatures and very, very short daylight hours.
But nestled in the spring calendar is the real trap.
Yes, the hidden anomaly.
This will absolutely destroy your budget if you do not see it coming. And that is Easter weekend.
It's brutal.
To me, it feels a lot like booking a quiet romantic getaway in New Orleans during Mardi Gras without realizing it.
That is the perfect analogy.
You show up expecting jazz and beignets, and suddenly you are paying premium rates to be caught in a massive, chaotic mob scene. Why is Easter such a violent economic shock to Krakow specifically?
This is one of those critical pieces of intelligence we pulled from the demographic data. And it comes down to a perfect storm of sociology, religion, and hotel yield management algorithms.
Okay, unpack that.
Poland is a deeply Catholic country, which means the profound religious significance of Easter drives an enormous amount of domestic travel.
So locals are moving around.
People from all over the country return to their home cities or travel to the cultural capital. Simultaneously, Poland sees a massive 80% surge in foreign tourists nationally during this period.
80%.
But Krakow specifically records a 51% demand increase, hyper-concentrated just on that city.
Wait, why are so many foreign tourists flooding in precisely at that moment alongside the domestic travelers?
It is driven largely by the Polish diaspora.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah, following Poland's accession to the EU in 2004, there was a massive wave of migration to the UK, Germany, and Scandinavia.
Right.
During Easter, that massive diaspora utilizes the long bank holiday weekend to fly home to visit family.
So it's expats coming back.
Plus, the standard European holidaymakers also taking advantage of the 4-day weekend. So you have 3 separate massive waves of demand.
Domestic, diaspora, and international leisure.
Crashing simultaneously into a city with a strictly finite number of hotel rooms. The dynamic pricing algorithms that control hotel rates instantly recognize this profound scarcity.
And the result for the traveler who just happens to book those dates without knowing the cultural context.
The result is catastrophic for a tight budget. Old Town hotels routinely triple their standard rates for this specific 4-night window.
Triple, just for that weekend.
A room that was totally reasonable and sitting at a mid-tier price on Tuesday is suddenly commanding luxury pricing by Friday. The algorithm simply scales the price to match the desperation of the demand.
So if summer is a suffocating wall of humanity, winter is freezing, and Easter is an algorithmic price gouging trap, when is the listener supposed to actually go?
The honest sweet spot. The only window where the economic value, the weather, and the crowd density all align in your favor is late September through mid-November.
Autumn shoulder season.
Exactly. The weather in early autumn is still relatively mild. The massive summer coach tour crowds have significantly thinned out, returning the Old Town to a breathable state.
And the algorithms.
Most importantly, the pricing algorithms relax. Those mid-range double rooms drop back down under 400 zloty. You essentially get the city back.
Okay, assuming you have successfully navigated the calendar minefield. You booked for mid-October, and you completely avoided the Easter trap.
Good job.
Now we need to tackle the physical reality of getting there and stepping off the plane. We have some incredibly aggressive flight data here.
The pricing is fascinating.
If you are flying from the UK, low-cost carriers like Wizz Air and Ryanair absolutely dominate the UK Krakow route. You can routinely find one-way fares for under £40 flying out of secondary airports like London, Luton, and Stansted.
It's basically the cost of a train ticket to London.
Less, sometimes. For our listeners in the US, the 2026 data from KAYAK lists transatlantic flights from Newark starting at $274 and from Boston starting at $296.
That is incredibly low for transatlantic.
How are these airlines sustaining these prices?
They sustain them through sheer volume and point-to-point aviation models.
What does that mean exactly?
Budget airlines rely on incredibly high-frequency turnarounds. By utilizing secondary airports like Luton, they pay lower landing fees, which they pass on to the consumer.
So they just pump flights in?
They are essentially dumping massive capacity into Krakow's John Paul II Airport, which sits about 11 kilometers from the city center.
Okay.
That airport was significantly expanded using EU cohesion funds specifically to handle this modern influx of narrow-body jets.
And the U.S. flights?
The transatlantic pricing is a reflection of airlines utilizing newer, more fuel-efficient aircraft. It opens up direct or single layover routes that bypass the expensive mega hubs like Heathrow or Charles de Gaulle.
Once you actually land at John Paul II, getting from the airport into the Old Town is surprisingly efficient.
Very efficient.
We looked at the logistics, and you have 2 main options that cater to different budgets. The SKA train is a dedicated rail line that runs every 30 minutes.
And it's so easy to find.
It costs exactly 17 zloty and drops you right at Krakow Goni, the main central station, in exactly 17 minutes. It runs like clockwork.
It really is the best way in.
The alternative, if you are arriving late, traveling with a family, or just want door-to-door service, is grabbing an Uber or a Bolt directly to your Old Town accommodation. That will average you between 60 and 80 zloty.
Both are excellent, safe options.
Yeah.
But what really stands out is the moment you step out of that train station or out of your Uber.
The atmosphere.
The sensory hit of Krakow is immediate and highly specific. It is not like arriving in a generic glass and steel modern metropolis.
No, it feels old immediately.
The first thing you often notice upon entering the main market square is the smell.
Oh, the cheese.
Yes. There is this distinct, incredibly rich aroma of smoked Auschwitz cheese being grilled over open flame at the street stalls.
That smells so good.
In the winter months, however, that pleasant smell blends with a controversial, slightly cold-tinged air.
I noticed that in the reports. Why does a modern European city still smell like coal in 2026?
It is a stubborn remnant of older heating methods prevalent in the broader Lesser Poland region.
People are still burning coal.
While the city center has modernized, many of the surrounding rural municipalities still rely on older coal furnaces for winter heating.
Wow.
Because Krakow sits in a geographic basin, when the atmospheric pressure is right, that smoke settles over the city.
So it's like a smog issue.
It is a major local political issue, but it undeniably adds a distinct, slightly Dickensian sensory layer to a winter arrival.
That paints quite a picture.
Visually, of course, you are immediately struck by the towering, asymmetrical Gothic spires of St. Mary's Basilica dominating the skyline. But perhaps the most iconic sensory experience is auditory.
The trumpet.
It is the Hijnar, the hourly trumpet call.
This is one of my favorite details about the city. You have this trumpeter who plays from the absolute tallest tower of St. Mary's.
Every single hour.
He plays every single hour, on the hour, in all four cardinal directions. But the fascinating quirk is that he abruptly stops mid-song. It is a 600-year-old tradition. You will inevitably hear it before you see it, and it feels exactly like a DJ cutting the music right before the beat drops.
It really does.
It leaves you hanging in this incredibly jarring, unresolved way. What is the historical mechanism behind that interrupted note? Because it feels far too intentional to just be a musical quirk.
Well, it is entirely intentional. And it's a brilliant example of how history becomes embedded in the daily, hourly rhythm of a city.
So what's the story?
The tradition of the trumpet call dates back to the Middle Ages when the trumpeter acted as the city's watchman.
Okay.
In 1241, during the Mongol invasion of Europe, the watchman spotted the approaching cavalry and sounded the alarm to warn the city to close the gates.
Wow, 1241.
Yeah. The melody starts strong and clear, broadcasting out over the square. But it cuts off abruptly because, according to the legend, the watchman was shot through the throat by a Mongol arrow mid-warning.
That is so dark.
By cutting the melody short every single hour, the city performs a historical reenactment of that exact interruption.
Every hour.
It serves as a continuous auditory memorial to a moment of sudden violent silence. Instead of building a static marble statue to commemorate the past, Krakow plays a song that never finishes.
It reminds every person in the square of the city's medieval vulnerability.
And the suddenness with which history can shift.
That is a haunting, incredible piece of living history. It really grounds you the moment you arrive.
It really does.
But after that initial sensory overload, you need a physical place to drop your bags. So let's systematically break down the 2026 accommodation market.
There are four very distinct tiers here.
Exactly. And the economics behind them are fascinating.
The entry point is the backpacker tier. If you were looking at the hostel market, properties like the Greg and Tom Hostel or the Mosquito Hostel act as the benchmarks for quality and price.
What are the numbers?
You were looking at dorm beds running between 85 to 121 zloty per night, heavily dependent on the season.
Which is very cheap.
And practically all of these highly rated hostels are located under 10 minutes walking distance from the main market square. It is highly central, highly efficient budget travel.
Moving up a bracket, we have the mid-range couple.
Right.
You're looking at properties like the Hotel Matejko or the Campanile Krakow. These are very central, 3-star double rooms, and they average about 423 zloty a night.
That translates to roughly 115 US dollars.
Which is still a great deal for a central double room.
Then we evaluate the family tier. This is where the priorities shift from purely location to logistics and comfort.
Right, because walking everywhere with kids gets tough.
Exactly. A prime example here is the Great Polonia Krakow City Center. It is a solid 3-star property. It offers a dedicated airport shuttle which eliminates transit stress. And crucially for those winter months, it has modern, reliable heating.
And the price?
Rooms here hover around $80 a night.
$80.
Alternatively, the Hotel Polski pod Bialium, Orom, which is situated right near the famous Mickiewicz statue, sits at about $73 a night.
Okay, finally, we hit the luxury tier. If you want 5-star suites, you are looking at historical properties like the Hotel Copernicus or the Curio Collection by Hilter.
The high end.
These average 1,119 zloty a night, which is roughly $305.
Though, as we discussed in those peak summer months, dynamic pricing will easily drive these suites above 1,500 zloty.
We also have to factor in the rental market. Standard Airbnbs and apart hotels start around $75 a night for a full 1-bedroom.
But if you want one of those highly curated, private, oasis rentals right near Wawel Castle.
Those quickly climbed to nearly $1,000 a night.
What is absolutely crucial to understand about this data is the massive elasticity in that luxury market compared to the incredibly stable budget tier.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the hostel bed fluctuating between 85 and 121 zloty represents a relatively tight pricing band. It remains an accessible budget option year-round.
Right, the floor stays pretty stable.
But the luxury tier is incredibly volatile, paying $300 in October versus upwards of $400 or 1,500 zloty in July for the exact same physical suite.
It's a huge swing.
It shows you how aggressively the high-end market capitalizes on peak demand and artificial scarcity. The budget tier provides essential shelter, the luxury tier trades purely on scarcity and the desire for exclusivity.
I am still completely stuck on the family value here, though.
The $80 room.
Yes, you can get an entire family room at a 3-star hotel with an airport shuttle for $80. That doesn't even buy you a windowless basement pod in London right now.
It's true.
What exactly is the economic mechanism keeping these mid-tier prices so aggressively low in a city that is simultaneously seeing a 106% increase in flight searches? Shouldn't that massive demand pull all the prices up?
It should, but the market is constrained by a combination of massive existing inventory and the specific cutthroat nature of the local competition.
Existing inventory from when?
Following the fall of communism and the subsequent property restitution laws in the 1990s, Krakow saw a tremendous volume of mid-tier and historical properties aggressively converted into hotels over the last 2 decades.
So there's just a lot of them.
There is simply a massive supply of rooms in that specific 3-star bracket. Furthermore, these traditional hotels are now competing directly against an explosion of apart-hotels and short-term rentals.
And those target the exact same $70 to $90 price point.
Exactly. To maintain their occupancy rates against an Airbnb that offers the added value of a full kitchen, the 3-star hotels are forced to keep their base rates aggressively low.
And bundle in perks.
Right. They bundle in logistical perks like shuttles, breakfast, and reliable climate control. They are fighting a daily war for volume, not for margin.
Speaking of having a kitchen, once your bags are dropped, you have to figure out how to eat.
My favorite topic.
And navigating the culinary landscape in Krakow is where you can either save a massive fortune or get absolutely fleeced. Let's look at the self-catering superpower of this city because the grocery economics are staggering.
If you want to genuinely understand the local economics and how residents survive the inflation of a tourist city, you have to look at the grocery sector.
Where do they shop?
Chains like Biedronka and Lidl absolutely dominate the discount grocery tier here. And you will find a Ubka convenience store on practically every single street corner.
And the prices.
The supply chain efficiency of these mega retailers allows them to offer prices that are rock bottom. They genuinely crush Western Europe in terms of daily caloric value.
The raw numbers prove it. A loaf of fresh bread is going to run you 4 to 6 zloty.
Under $2.
500 grams of kielbasa, the traditional sausage, is 12 to 18 zloty. A liter of milk is around 4 zloty.
And here's the fact that will stun anyone arriving from the UK or US.
The beer.
A 500 milliliter Tiski, or Uwiek beer, is 3 zloty and 50 groszy in-store.
That's less than $1.
If you take a 5-minute walk to an Old Town bar, you are paying 16 to 22 zloty for that exact same beer.
The hospitality markup in the Old Town bars is astronomical compared to the retail baseline.
It really is.
But dining out doesn't have to be prohibitively expensive either, provided you understand the history of the city's institutions.
You have the milk bars, the Berry Molesny.
Tell me about those.
These are the old communist-era worker cafeterias, places like Bar Molesny Podtemidi. They are an absolute cultural institution.
How do they work?
You walk in with a tray, and they still serve massive hot plates of handmade pierogi for anywhere from 15 to 22 zloty.
That's amazing.
If you want more modern upscale dining experience, the trendy Kazimierz district offers mid-range restaurant mains for about 55 to 90 zloty.
We also need to cover some foundational etiquette rules for when you are engaging with the service sector and touring the historical sites.
Very important.
First, tipping is generally expected at 10% if a service charge is not already explicitly included on your bill.
Standard for Europe.
Second, when you are ordering pierogi, never ever call them Russian pierogi.
Do not do that.
They are called Ruski pierogi, which actually translates to Ruthenian. referring to a specific historical pre-war region, not the modern state of Russia.
That is a very quick way to annoy a local waiter.
Exactly. And crucially, moving away from the culinary side, when you are touring, there's absolutely no photography allowed inside the exhibits at Auschwitz-Birkenau.
Zero tolerance for that.
It is a strict, non-negotiable rule of respect enforced by the memorial staff.
Those etiquette points are vital for navigating the city respectfully and understanding the cultural sensitivities.
For sure.
But looking back at the food costs, the economic spread between self-catering at a Biedronka and dining out at a milk bar is a fascinating study in time value.
See, I have to challenge the premise of the self-catering strategy, though.
Why is that?
I hear the grocery prices, and they are incredibly low. But if a massive plate of authentic handmade pierogi at a milk bar is 15 zloty, which is less than $5, isn't grocery shopping a total false economy?
In what way?
I mean, why waste your severely limited vacation time standing in line to buy bread and making sad sandwiches in a cramped hostel kitchen when you can sit down and eat actual culturally significant history at a milk bar for the price of a latte back home?
That is a highly analytical critique, and the answer comes down to how you personally calculate the value of your time versus your cash flow, and also understanding why the milk bar is so cheap in the first place.
Why is it so cheap?
You are right that a $5 milk bar lunch is a phenomenal deal, but it is important to understand the mechanism behind that price.
Okay.
Berry Mleczny were established to feed factory workers, and today the Polish government still actually subsidizes the base ingredients, the flour, the milk, the potatoes, for these specific registered cafeterias.
Wait, really? The government pays for the ingredients?
That is why the price is so artificially low. It is an economic anomaly funded by the state treasury, not a free market miracle.
That makes perfect sense.
So for a short-term visitor on a 5-day trip, you're absolutely right. The opportunity cost of making a sandwich when you could be experiencing state-subsidized culinary history at Bar Mleczny Pod Temedu is way too high.
You shouldn't waste the time.
However, if you are a backpacker on a multi-month cross-continent trip, eating out 3 times a day, even at $5 a meal, aggressively burns through your capital.
True.
Self-catering a breakfast of fresh bread and kielbasa for $2 a day saves you $20 a week, which pays for your train ticket to the next city.
That puts it in perspective.
Plus, navigating a Biedronka is a sociological experience in itself. It shows you exactly how the locals actually manage the economy.
Okay, that makes perfect sense when you factor in the state subsidies and the long-term travel budget. So let's connect all these accommodation and food costs to give you a holistic daily burn rate.
Let's do the math.
We have calculated 3 distinct daily budgets for 2026, so you know exactly what your bank account is in for.
We begin with the low budget.
Oh.
This profile is for the backpacker, utilizing the hostel dorms, heavily self-catering from the discount grocers, and walking everywhere instead of taking taxis.
What's the total?
You are looking at a total daily spend of 180 to 230 zloty per day. That is roughly $45.
Wow, $45. Let's break that down.
The mathematical breakdown looks exactly like this. 90 zloty for your dorm bed, 40 zloty for your supermarket provisions, 20 zloty for that one subsidized milk bar lunch we just debated,
Right.
17 zloty for a daily tram pass, and 30 zloty allocated for one paid sightseeing entry.
It's incredibly tight, but totally doable.
Then we step up to the mid-range budget. This is for a couple splitting the cost of a central 3-star double room and mixing up their dining between casual spots and nice sit-down restaurants.
And the cost for this?
This will cost you 520 to 680 zloty per person per day. That is roughly $140 each.
Still very reasonable for Europe. What's the breakdown?
Your half of the hotel share is 210 zloty. 2 restaurant meals will run you 130 zloty. 2 attraction entries are 100 zloty, and you have an 80 zloty buffer allocated for drinks in Kazimierz.
Finally, we analyze the high budget. This is the luxury profile. Staying in a 4-star boutique hotel, booking private guided tours, and taking taxis door to door.
This tier jumps dramatically.
To what?
To 1,400 to 1,900 zloty per person per day, roughly $400.
$400.
The breakdown. Your share of a high-end suite is 560 zloty. Fine dining takes up 350 zloty. A private tour of Auschwitz is 400 zloty, and a luxury spa treatment or a high-end vodka tasting experience is 250 zloty.
What I find genuinely amazing looking at these 3 tiers is how seamlessly scalable Krakow is as a destination.
It is a hallmark of the city's robust service economy. The infrastructure effortlessly flexes to accommodate a $45 day just as beautifully and comprehensively as it accommodates a $400 day.
It really does.
Very few European cities possess that level of economic elasticity without one end of the spectrum feeling completely compromised or dangerous.
But let me focus intensely on that high budget for a second, because the math is starting to bother me.
Oh.
What's bothering you? $400 a day per person is no longer the cheap Eastern Europe stereotype. That is nearly $1,000 a day for a couple traveling together.
Right.
At that specific price point, are you actually getting $400 worth of tangible value in terms of service and product? Or are you just heavily overpaying in a budget city because the operators know they can charge wealthy foreigners a massive premium simply by slapping the word private on a tour?
If we look closely at the underlying value proposition, it leans heavily toward the latter.
You are overpaying.
At $400 a day, you are starting to violently hit the ceiling of what the city's historical infrastructure can genuinely offer in terms of true, frictionless luxury.
Make sense of that for me.
Well, yes, you can pay 400 zloty for a private Auschwitz tour, but the physical historical site, the emotional weight, and the crowds you are walking through are the exact same ones the backpacker is experiencing for a fraction of the cost.
Right. You can't buy your way out of the crowds there.
You can pay 560 zloty for your share of a suite, but the polish of the service culture at that high end hasn't quite caught up to the price tag. You are paying Western European premium prices, but you are not always getting the Vienna or Paris level of flawless, invisible luxury execution.
So what are you actually paying for?
What you're actually paying for is a buffer. You are essentially paying a massive premium to isolate yourself from the 7 million other tourists.
And speaking of paying premiums, now that you know what you should be spending, we absolutely have to detail the specific mechanisms designed to quietly steal that budget.
The trap.
There are 3 named logistics traps operating in Krakow for 2026 that you must actively avoid.
The first is the Auschwitz free entry trap. This catches an incredible amount of travelers out every single season.
How does it work?
Technically and legally, entry to the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial is free if you go as an individual without a guided tour.
Because it's a memorial.
Exactly. The memorial maintains this policy to ensure the site remains accessible to everyone for educational purposes. However, those free individual tickets sell out up to 60 days ahead of time during peak season.
How is the inventory vanishing that fast? What happens if you miss that 60-day window?
The inventory vanishes because the site has a hard physical capacity limit to prevent the degradation of the historical barracks. If you show up at the gates or try to book online just 2 weeks out, those free slots are entirely gone.
So what do you do?
Your only available alternative to access the site becomes booking a guided slot through a third-party operator, which will cost you 180 zloty. That is a significant expense you likely didn't budget for simply because you didn't understand the ticketing architecture.
So what is the fix here?
The fix here is critical and time-sensitive. Book the English language slot at visit.auschwitz.org the exact moment your airline flights are confirmed. Do not wait for your itinerary to finalize.
The psychology of that free ticket trap is fascinating.
Isn't it?
It operates exactly like trying to get concert tickets through a major vendor where the free or cheap entry tier is mostly an illusion. It exists on paper to satisfy a mandate, but the available inventory is so limited that the system essentially forces the disorganized traveler into the VIP upcharge.
Precisely. It is a tax on the disorganized.
And the second trap.
The second major pitfall is rooted in the physical limitations of historical engineering. This is the Wieliczka Salt Mine queue trap.
Oh, the salt mine.
If you just walk up to the mine on a Tuesday morning expecting to buy a ticket at the window, it costs 129 zloty, but it forces you into a brutal 2-hour wait in a physical standing line.
2 hours standing in a queue cuts a massive, unrecoverable hole in your itinerary. Why is the bottleneck so severe, and how do you bypass it?
The bottleneck is severe because of the physics of moving thousands of modern humans hundreds of meters underground into a 13th century mine.
Right, elevators.
Exactly. You are constrained by elevator capacities and ventilation limits. They simply cannot push people through the shafts any faster.
So what are the logical fixes?
You have 2 logistical fixes. You either book the absolute first tour at 8:30 a.m. to physically beat the arrival of the cruise coaches, or you buy a combined Krakow card for 130 zlotys in advance.
What does the card do?
That card covers all your public transport and gives you prearranged timed access to the mine, completely bypassing that 2-hour physical queue.
Totally worth the one extra zloty. And trap number 3 is the main market pickpocket trap.
We need to be clear about this one.
Yes, Poland holds a U.S. State Department Level 1 rating overall, which is the safest possible tier. But the Rynek Główny, the main market square, and Tramline 3 heading down to the Kazimierz district are highly active pickpocket zones in the summer.
It's the crowds.
Mitigation is simple but necessary. Wear a zipped crossbody bag, take your smartphone completely out of your back pocket, and beware of opening your wallet at the Obworznek pretzel stands.
Those pretzel stands are hotspots.
The crowds naturally bunch up around these small carts, creating the perfect physical compression for pickpockets to operate unnoticed.
It is basic urban awareness, but the trap exists precisely because the city feels so overwhelmingly historical and safe that travelers let their psychological guard down.
They just stop paying attention.
Right. And this dynamic leads perfectly into a broader analysis of personal safety and mobility because the experience changes drastically depending on your traveler profile.
Let's establish the baseline facts here. As we just mentioned, Poland is sitting at a level 1 on the U.S. State Department advisory for 2026.
Safest rating.
The violent crime rates are comparable to, if not demonstrably better than, major Western European capitals like London or Paris. The trams and the municipal buses run safely and reliably day and night.
If we look at solo female travelers, the sociological reports consistently show that Krakow is one of the easiest, most comfortable European cities for walking home after midnight.
Really? Even at night?
Specifically within the Old Town and the broader Kazimierz districts. The streets are well lit, heavily populated, and heavily policed.
But there is a caveat, right?
However, there is a significant, highly localized caveat. The Plaknowy area, which is the central square in Kazimierz, gets incredibly rowdy on Friday and Saturday nights.
Right.
It becomes an absolute magnet for large UK stag groups taking advantage of that cheap 3 zloty retail beer we discussed earlier.
It creates a totally different, highly chaotic vibe.
It does.
But shifting to families, the city is incredibly well adapted. You have the Planty Park Ring, which is this massive green belt that completely encircles the old town where the medieval walls used to be.
It's beautiful.
It is entirely walkable, totally stroller-friendly, and completely free. You have the fire-breathing dragon statue down at the foot of Wawel Castle and the Park Jordana playgrounds.
Very family-friendly.
From a purely logistical standpoint, it is a very easy city to navigate with young children without relying on taxis.
The pedestrian infrastructure, especially around the historical core, is excellent. The city's done a remarkable job of pedestrianizing the center to keep the exhaust and traffic away from the historical facades.
But I want to question that stag party dynamic you brought up regarding Plaknowy.
Okay.
If an entire neighborhood square is internationally famous for hosting roaming packs of drunk bachelor parties every single weekend, does that level 1 safety rating really capture the reality on the ground at 2 a.m.?
That's a fair question.
I mean, level 1 implies total peace of mind, but a pack of 20 highly intoxicated guys in matching t-shirts is inherently unpredictable and often intimidating.
You are identifying a very nuanced gap in how international safety ratings are calculated.
How so?
The U.S. State Department Level 1 rating is primarily measuring macro systemic risks. Terrorism, violent muggings, political instability, kidnapping.
Okay, the big stuff.
Krakow scores incredibly well on all those systemic fronts. The state is stable and violent crime is extraordinarily low. But safe from systemic danger does not always equal comfortable.
Ah, I see the distinction.
A stag party stumbling out of a shop bar in Plaknowy at 2 a.m. is statistically highly unlikely to violently mug you, so their presence doesn't trigger a crime statistic that the State Department monitors.
But they're still annoying.
However, they might yell, bump into you, break a bottle, or create a generalized atmosphere of intimidation. The Level 1 rating accurately captures the legal and physical safety of the city, but it completely misses the behavioral reality of hyper-tourism driven by cheap alcohol in specific micro-neighborhoods.
That distinction between systemic safety and localized comfort is crucial for setting expectations. And moving from safety statistics to the actual emotional reality of the trip, we need to dive into the highest highs and the genuine disappointments. Because the emotional swings in a city with this much history are massive.
The best moments in Krakow are profound and often deeply atmospheric. We already discussed the Hejna trumpet call from St. Mary's.
Right.
That hourly auditory connection to a 13th century Mongol invasion is incredible. Another massive high is the physical experience of descending 135 meters underground into the Wieliczka Salt Mine and standing inside the Chapel of St. Kinga.
I've seen pictures of that chapel. It's unreal.
It is a massive, echoing cathedral carved entirely out of rock salt by the miners themselves right down to the chandeliers. It is structurally and visually mind-bending.
On a more culinary street-level note, standing at the Plaknowy Rotunda at 1 a.m., eating a fresh, hot zapiekanka.
The ultimate late-night food.
For anyone unfamiliar, this is basically a Polish-French bread pizza loaded with mushrooms and cheese, toasted in a tiny oven, and it costs just 18 zloty. It is the ultimate, authentic, late-night travel moment.
It really is.
And then, on the completely opposite end of the emotional spectrum, there is the profoundly immersive World War II walkthrough at the Schindler Factory Museum.
Incredible museum.
The narrative curation there is world-class. It doesn't just show you artifacts, it walks you chronologically through the psychological terror of the occupation.
But we promised an honest, unvarnished verdict, which means critically examining the genuine disappointments. And structurally, there are several.
What tops the list of disappointments?
The main market square, while undeniably architecturally stunning, has largely devolved at the ground level into a restaurant tout's gauntlet.
Ugh, touts.
You have hosts aggressively stepping into your path, shoving laminated menus in your face. Cynically, those menus are often quoted directly in euros at double the local zloty exchange rate, specifically designed to trap confused or mathematically tired tourists.
It feels very cynical and entirely strips the romance away from the square.
It does.
And then there is the trajectory of Kazimierz. This was historically the vibrant Jewish quarter before the war.
Yes.
For years in the early 2000s, it served as the gritty, authentic, bohemian alternative to the polished Old Town. But it has lost so much of that pre-2019 grit.
The gentrification is real.
The crumbling facades have been plastered over, and it has been largely replaced by generic craft cocktail bars and neon signs that you could find in any gentrified neighborhood in the world.
Lastly, and this is absolutely crucial for your itinerary planning,
Mm-hmm.
the emotional weight of Auschwitz.
Yeah.
It is a non-optional piece of historical education, but visiting the memorial is a heavy, devastating, and physically exhausting experience.
It really takes a toll.
It is guaranteed to ruin any same-day sightseeing plans you might have sketched out. You cannot go to a concentration camp in the morning and then cheerfully go vodka tasting or take a river cruise in the afternoon.
No, absolutely not.
The cognitive dissonance is too severe. It requires its own dedicated day to process the grief and the scale of the sight.
I want to tackle the gentrification of Kazimierz, though, because it brings up a really complex debate.
Let's do it.
Travelers always mourn the loss of grit, but is a neighborhood really ruined just because it finally got better plumbing, safer streets, and craft ice in the bars?
That's the question.
Or are we, as tourists, just selfishly nostalgic for a grittiness that was never actually ours to begin with? I liken it to Brooklyn or Shoreditch. The local residents probably prefer the safer streets and higher property values, even if the backpackers miss the cheap, divey aesthetic that made it feel like a secret discovery.
That is the eternal, unsolvable paradox of modern travel tourism.
Right.
We demand authentic, untouched environments, but our very presence and the capital we inject into the local economy inevitably destroys the economic conditions that created that authenticity in the first place.
It's a cycle.
Kazimierz is a prime example. It was historically a place of immense tragedy during the Holocaust, and later a place of severe municipal neglect during the communist era. The grit that travelers loved so much in 2015 was literally the result of decades of poverty and underinvestment.
So we were romanticizing poverty.
Then, Steven Spielberg filmed Schindler's List there in the 90s, sparking initial interest, and the tourism wave followed.
Yeah.
Now that international money has flowed in, the buildings are restored and the bars are upscale.
Right.
For a resident whose property value just doubled and who now has a safe, clean street, it is a massive triumph. For a traveler looking for a cheap, underground bohemian vibe, it is a profound disappointment. The neighborhood hasn't been ruined, it has just evolved into a different market tier driven by our own demand.
If the Easter traps, the gentrified quarters, and the aggressive Euro touts in the square sound too exhausting to navigate, you do not have to cancel your European plans. You can pivot. We have pulled the data on 2 excellent lateral alternative moves for you.
If you still want the authentic Polish Gothic experience, but want to avoid the crushing density of those 7 million tourists, look at Wrocław, Poland.
Real cool.
It is just 2 hours away via the high-speed train network. It features a genuinely stunning, colorful Gothic market square that easily rivals Krakow's, but with significantly fewer foreign tourists altering the vibe.
And the prices.
Because the demand is lower, the hotel rates are about 30% cheaper across the board. Plus, it has this whimsical, bizarre, entirely organic scavenger hunt of over 300 tiny bronze dwarf statues hidden all across the old town. It is a brilliant piece of non-commercial public art.
I love the dwarves. It is such a unique, unpretentious draw that hasn't been entirely monetized yet.
It's very charming.
Our second alternative takes you out of Poland entirely and shifts the focus southward. Budapest, Hungary, it absolutely retains its crown as Eastern Europe's thermal bath capital.
The baths are incredible.
Right. You can spend roughly $50 a day to soak in massive, ornate, neo-Baroque thermal bath complexes. To put that in perspective, Western equivalents in Switzerland or Germany would easily charge you $200 for that exact same hydrotherapy experience.
Easily.
Furthermore, Budapest offers far superior direct flight options for our listeners coming from Australian and North American gateways, usually routing cleanly via Doha and Istanbul.
Architecturally and geographically, Budapest operates on a much grander scale. It feels like an imposing imperial capital straddling the Danube, whereas Krakow feels like an intimate medieval trading town.
But let's debate that flight logic for a second.
Okay.
If I am flying from Boston, is it really worth adding a massive layover in Istanbul, adding hours of travel exhaustion and potential delays, just to save $50 on a thermal bath entry fee?
Yeah.
Or does Krakow's direct accessibility with those sub-$300 direct flights from Newark and Boston we talked about ultimately trump Budapest's sheer scale?
Yeah.
At a certain point in your life, your time and your physical energy are worth more than a cheap spa ticket.
If we look strictly at the logistics and the value of time, you are absolutely right. The friction of a layover is a massive hidden cost in terms of physical energy and lost vacation time.
Exactly.
If you have only a tight 5-day window off from work, Krakow's direct flight access wins every single time. That frictionless accessibility is exactly the mechanism driving Krakow's flight interest up 106%.
Because it's just easier to get there.
People will willingly endure the crushing crowds in the main market square simply because they didn't have to navigate a stressful plane change in Istanbul to get there. Budapest is the objectively better value for the sheer scale of activities, but Krakow's the better value for the logistics of arrival.
We have covered the algorithmic surge, the crowding tension, the hidden traps, the economics of the grocery stores, and the lateral alternatives.
We covered a lot today.
It is time for the ultimate distillation of everything we have discussed. It is time for the "Is it worth it?" matrix. We are explicitly answering the question across 5 distinct listener personas for the 2026 travel landscape.
Let's begin with the backpacker persona. The verdict here is a resounding yes.
Yes for the backpacker.
When you analyze the raw dated dorm beds at 86 zloty, heavily subsidized milk bar pierogi lunches at 18 zloty, endless free walking tours, and the logistical ability to catch cheap overnight trains to Berlin, or Prague-Krakow, is objectively the best value European capital in 2026 for a traveler prioritizing extreme budget efficiency over luxury.
Next, we evaluate the mid-range couple. The verdict here is yes with conditions.
Important conditions.
The conditions are strict. You must schedule your trip between October and February. You absolutely must avoid the algorithmic pricing trap of Easter entirely. And you have to secure your Auschwitz entry slots exactly 60 days out.
Essential.
If you ignore these logistical warnings and go in July, you are going to be paying Prague or Vienna prices for significantly worse crowds and a stressful experience.
The family persona, the verdict is yes to this.
Good news for families.
The entire historic city center is safely encircled by the stroller-friendly Planty Park ring, eliminating traffic stress. You can secure very comfortable, reliable 3-star family rooms for under $90 a night.
That $80 room with the shuttle.
Exactly. The Wieliczka Salt Mine serves as a genuine, weatherproof kid magnet. And because the local food is highly accessible, mild, and cheap, feeding the family never escalates into a massive financial fight.
Now we look at the luxury traveler. The verdict here is a flat no.
A hard no.
Yes, $300 5-star suites physically exist within the Old Town walls, but the product gap is glaring. When you compare the high-end tier in Krakow to the mature luxury stock in Vienna, Prague, or Budapest, it is distinctly lacking.
It just isn't there yet.
The invisible polish of the service culture, the depth and scale of the spa experiences, and the Michelin-level fine dining scene are simply still catching up to the prices they are charging.
And finally, we analyzed the digital nomad persona. The verdict is yes, with conditions.
What are the conditions?
The technical and economic infrastructure is absolutely there. The fiber internet network is excellent, and dedicated, modern co-working spaces like Cluster or Brain Embassy run a very reasonable 700 to 1,100 zloty monthly.
And housing.
You can secure a one-bedroom apartment for a long stay for 2,500 to 3,800 zloty. However, the condition is entirely legal. The Schengen zone limit.
Right, the visa rules.
The Schengen area is a borderless zone covering most of the EU. For non-EU passports, you are legally restricted to staying exactly 90 days out of any rolling 180-day period. This acts as a hard, non-negotiable legal ceiling on how long you can actually base yourself in the city before facing deportation or entry bans.
I'm still fixated on that luxury no, though. I have to challenge the logic behind that market.
Okay, challenge away.
If the luxury product is genuinely lacking in polish and depth compared to Vienna, is that 1,500 zloty peak summer suite just pure, unadulterated price gouging? Is it completely disconnected from the actual service provided, or are you genuinely paying for some other invisible asset?
You're paying for a fortress.
A fortress.
In the middle of July, when the city's medieval infrastructure is physically duckling under the weight of those 7 million tourists, the luxury hotel is not actually selling you a better thread count on the Egyptian cotton sheets. And they aren't selling you a better concierge.
So what are they selling?
They are selling you silence. They are selling you access to a private, walled courtyard, an uncrowded breakfast room, and physical distance from the stag parties screaming in the street. It is price gouging. In terms of the tangible, physical product, yes. The service definitely does not equal the price tag. But in terms of the intangible value of peace and quiet in a hyper-surging, overcrowded city, the hoteliers know exactly what that sanctuary is worth to a stressed, wealthy traveler. And they calibrate the algorithm to extract exactly that maximum price.
That reframes the entire luxury market. You aren't buying service, you're buying isolation. Well, we've unpacked every single layer of the city's economy, infrastructure, and culture.
As we conclude this analysis, I want to leave you with a forward-looking thought experiment, especially considering that 106% spike in flight searches we started with.
It's a crazy number.
If Krakow does successfully navigate the national parliament and implement its 5 zloty tourist tax in 2026, will that projected 30 to 50 million zloty actually be enough to preserve the genuine soul and the physical infrastructure of the city?
It's a valid question.
Or, by continuing to accommodate and push for this massive, overwhelming volume of transient visitors, are we quietly watching the final moments of an authentic, living Eastern European capital before it officially tips over and becomes an open-air museum entirely dedicated to extracting tourist capital, much like Venice?
It is something deeply crucial to consider before you hit book.
Exactly.
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.